So everybody is muted as of right now, and we are recording. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back for week 2 of our 10-week training series. Today we will be talking about the tribal court assessment and funding from the BIA, tribal court budgeting, and PL 280 funding. We hope that in hosting these training sessions that you will come away with more ideas on how to manage your tribal court, even if it's just a little bit more information that you have than you had before. Before we get started, just sending out the few housekeeping reminders. We're in a virtual setting, and this training, like I said, is being recorded. We'd like to remind everyone to please keep your cell phone or computer microphones muted unless speaking, and to be able to unmute yourself, press *6 or click on the little microphone button to unmute. In today's session, we welcome Tricia Tingle, Associate Director, and Benny Francisco, Tribal Court Assessment Director with Tribal Justice Support at the Office of Justice Services with U.S. Department of Interior Indian Affairs. We're also welcoming Monique Vondal-Ricky, who is a Tribal Court Project Manager for Kodiak LLC, one of the organizations who conducts tribal court assessments in the AVCP region, and Andrea Woya, who is the Outreach Coordinator for AVCP's Community Services Division. So at this time, I would like to welcome John Charlie to provide today's prayer. John?
Hey, hi, good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, good to be part of this. But first I wanted to say that if you all, I think Monique, good to see you again. I felt that tribal justice is a perfect program that's going to play a very important role in our region after hearing what Judge Rash many years ago when I heard his story. So I had some great ideas for this program, and I pray and hope to God that this program flourishes and grows for the benefit of all. But first I wanted to read a passage that best fits this program found in Exodus 18:19 to 20, and my prayer is that everyone takes to heart the instructions and advice that it holds. Listen now to my voice. I will give you counsel, and God will be with you. Stand before God for the people, so that you may bring the difficulties to God. And you shall teach them the statutes and the laws, and show them the way in which they must walk and work they must do. Moreover, you shall select from all of the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, a place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. And let them judge the people at all times. Then it will be that every great matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge. So it will be easier for you, for they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all this people will also go to their place in peace. Heavenly Father, Almighty God, we come before your throne of grace, first to thank you and to praise you for all that you do and continue to do. And I ask that your blessings be upon this program and the participants and all those that are in the villages, that you help and guide them to flourish this program for the health and benefit of all. Give wisdom and understanding to all those that will be leading this program for your praise and glory. These we ask in your most holy name, Lord Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, John. Now I would like to hand the stage off to Benny Francisco, if you're on the line. You may have to press *6 or unmute Benny if you are on the line. So just again, Benny, if you're on the line, press *6 or unmute.
Monique, he is trying to talk. So I don't know that we can hear him. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I just don't. I'm telling him we can't hear him. He says, hold on.
If I notice that if people are on, or if they have earbuds in or headphones, that sometimes it doesn't work.
Well,
Okay, this is Benny. Can you guys hear me?
Hi, Benny, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I was calling in and I had to quickly switch over to something different. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for having me, ABCP and Denise, for the invite on talking with ABCP tribes again and seeing you guys' faces again. I was just telling Tricia and the rest of the staff earlier today. I sent them a picture of one of our last group photo that we did during the last AFN that we were a part of, and we definitely do miss our time there in Alaska. So I'm going to go first just because but I just want to share with you guys and the rest of the afternoon that we are in the midst of issuing out new contracts for our court assessment. So as you guys may have recalled, we have done the assessment starting in fiscal year 2016 to what we just ended in 2020. And that was our first contracts that we have submitted out from TJS to do court assessments, and that was from the appropriations from Congress. So we have just wrapped up those 5 years, and it has been a tremendous accomplishment for not only, of course, our office, but of course all of tribal courts down here in the lower 48 and of course in Alaska. So to date, one of the most exciting news is we have completed 219 tribal court assessments in PL 280 jurisdictions, and of course, 75% of that is in Alaska. I mean, I think that that shows the great amount of work that we have done there in Alaska. One of the things that I do want to mention, and Tricia will go through the slides that we have here, but one of the most important things I want the tribes to know is that we are beginning new court assessments starting in winter of 2021. So I expect that our new contractors will be ready to go and to begin the next cycle of court assessments in late winter, early spring of 2022. One of the other important things to note is that in the slides, when Tricia talks about the slides, the tribes that were assessed in FY 2017 and 18 are highly encouraged to submit another court assessment because we do the assessment. We encourage tribes to go through the assessments at least every 4 to 5 years. So that's super important to know. And if you see your list, if you see your name on that table, please do reach out to myself or Melissa, and we can send you the template and get another tribal court assessment requested into our office. The other important thing to note is that later in the slides, you'll see that some of the tribes that we have assessed have not submitted any type of funding. So please do submit funding which are your post-assessment fundings, the funding that comes after your assessment. Some tribes never submitted any type of funding. So I would encourage those tribes to look into that and contact our office so that we can send you the checklist and the request letter for funding. And then lastly, Melissa and I have, we have the capability to and the time to set aside and meet with individual tribes if they wish to do so. So at the end of the slides, you'll see our contact information, in both Melissa and I's phone number and email. And please do reach out so that we can set aside some time to do a teleconference or a video call, so that we can provide you some TA and answer some of your questions regarding the tribal court assessment process, and then what next steps that the tribal court can take. So those are really the most important things I really wanted to share with you all. Unfortunately, there's didn't realize there were some time conflicts down here. I know we're 2 hours different, so I apologize for that. But I wanted to come in before Tricia and just share my greetings with you guys and let you guys know the important things that I wanted to share. But in the slides, you'll see all of the data that we have done for PL 280, and of course, all of the funding that has been distributed out, and then of course the listing of tribes that we encourage to submit another tribal court assessment. So I'm going to hand it over to Tricia.
Thanks, Benny.
Should I go?
Oh yeah, I was just saying thank you to Benny. I just want to confirm that you can see your PowerPoint on the screen on slide 1.
We can.
Okay.
So before, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, echoing what Benny had said, we miss Alaska. And talking to you like this is not as wonderful as it is talking in person. I know that you all are experiencing the same constraints. We want to make sure everybody's safe, but we are coming when we can. So probably not this year. I'd hoped to come this year, but it looks like COVID is surging again. So with that said, and before we get into the PowerPoint, I think it's important to tell you all of this is the PowerPoint is mechanical and absolutely necessary, but the results of all of this work from TJS, from the contractors, to the tribal villages, to ABCP, all of this teamwork has produced tremendous results. And one of those things that I think that is very important is, as you know, we provide not only PL 280 funding, but Tawahe funding. And we provide Tawahe funding to Anchorage, to the Alaska Justice Center. And what they have started doing is working in Anchorage with particular ICWA cases and transferring those cases when appropriate back to the tribal court. That is the greatest news we could possibly do, because now the children are home in the villages and their cases are being transferred to you guys. That's been a long time coming in Alaska, and the result is ultimately the children are home. And that is the whole purpose of all of this technical work that we do. And thank you to the villages that have your tribal courts and are working so hard to keep them structurally high functioning. This is how we've all done it as a team, and we'll go through the PowerPoints. So do I push or do you push it? do I go push the PowerPoint? Oh, no, you do. Okay, so this is just really quickly. The important thing is that TJS is a statutorily mandated office. We actually are directed by the law to do certain things. And one of those is to provide training and technical assistance to tribal courts and funding. And so that is what we do. Next slide. The two contractors that are going to work in Alaska are the Whitener Group and Kodiak. You are familiar with those particular assessment teams. They've been working in Alaska for a long time and have a great rapport with you guys and have been very successful. We 3612, 25 United States Code 3612 tells us that we have to do that, and they have to be non-federal entities, the assessment teams, which it works out really great. Next slide. So the tribal court assessments were created from the trial court performance standards, and it is what Western courts use. We've adapted them to tribal court and to your particular issues, whatever the tribe's needs are. And there are 5 performance areas: access to justice, expedition and timeliness. That is a lot of due process, equality, fairness, and integrity, again, due process, independence and accountability, and tribal specific. Anything that your tribe needs specifically, we will address that in these assessments. There are 70 measures, and the assessment teams will go through those measures with you. The one thing I want to make clear right now is funding. The villages can receive funding from TJS only in the event that these 2 assessment teams come in and do the assessment. That is very important for everyone to know. And the reason is the law requires us to do a particular process, and we have particular standards that we go by, and it is the trial court performance standards, which are managed and manipulated to address tribal courts. So we report up to Congress. We have had increases in our budget, and part of the reason I think for the increases is that our performance standards are consistent and we can report a lot of data up the chain. So I want to make that clear that it is the 2 assessment teams that give you the opportunity for funding. Next slide, please. So our 3 major functions are to provide funding, training, and technical assistance. Funding, of course, comes from your funding document. Your court assessment team will help you. Training, if you guys want a particular training, let us know. We also provide ABCP and others funding for training, as they are on the ground and they know far better what you need than we do. And technical assistance, if in the event that you need someone to come and work with your village or work with your tribal court for a particular time, we are more than happy to send someone in. We have used, we've sent Darlene Daniels in to help people. So we're happy to pay the tribes to bring in local people who understand what the tribal justice systems do in your area. And the next slide. So here is our funding for Alaska. Last year under PL 280, we had 15 million. And of that 15 million, almost 10 million went to, well, 10 million went to Alaska. So a good portion of it goes to Alaska. You get your direct funding, $5,000 per village. That is set in stone. Every time we get the appropriations, you get that money immediately. And we divided it up. The direct funding was $5.5 million. The tribal court support direct funding, that's the $5,000 per each village, is over $1 million. The training court personnel, and then justice support for tribes outside Alaska and California. So that was distributed. That was a calculation that was done about 2 months ago. We have now distributed all 15 million of the 2020 funding. We're waiting for the new funding to come in, the new budget. So the next slide. This gives you an idea of our PL 280 distribution. We've not even talked about Tawahe, and ABCP receives quite a sizable amount under Tawahe as well. But in 2019, Alaska received 7 and 28 million, and 21, that was, we had not distributed 5 million. So you have received more than 5 million, I would say more around 7 to date. On the next slide. Now this is a Tawahe distribution, and as you can see, Alaska receives a substantial amount of money, to almost 3 million in 2019, over 1.5 in 2020, and probably 2 million to date out of the 21 budget. And that all goes to ICWA cases, to ICWA attorneys, to guardians ad litem, to victim specialists who help in different areas. So that is in addition to your PL 280 funds. The next slide is your Violence Against Women Act monies. We don't receive very much. We receive about 3 million, a little over 3 million annually. And we do fund the Justice Project in Anchorage out of our VAWA monies. It's just not attributed on this 2021 account, but in 2019 we provided almost 300,000. In 2020, 500 plus, and I suspect that we will be giving, that the numbers will show that we provided the Justice Center at over $300,000 just recently. And that is to help your children come home. And the next slide. We also have our program funds, and when we see that you guys need something and it doesn't fall within a particular category of domestic violence, child dependency, then we will fund you through our 3510 account. That's our operational account. And as you can see, 21 numbers were not completely done when this chart was completed. And the next slide. I think it's important to look at the number of positions that we fund, and this is what we report up to Congress, and it is so very important that in Alaska, under the 2019 funds for PL 280, you guys received 75 positions. Court clerks is what you usually ask for, court administrators, judges, ICWA attorneys, a cadre of positions. But through the PL 280 money, you received 75 positions. Thereafter, in the next slide, in 2020, it went from 75 to 110 positions. So your positions are increasing under the PL 280. You're asking for them. We are, of course, providing them when you ask. The same goes for court clerks, court administrators, judges, ICWA attorneys. Victim specialist is something that the villages are beginning to ask for. And in 2021, we have, again, we had not totally distributed our funding, but at that time it was 32 positions that were funded. And you can see it is substantially higher than the other areas of the United States. Okay. I know I'm going through this quickly, but I know there's other people that are needing to talk. So the next slide is trainings. We do at times include the trainings that ABCP has as far as numbers are concerned. We did not in 21 because it has been a very odd year, 20 and 21. We're so glad y'all are going forward now, but Alaska, we've trained 2,019, 1,020 during the pandemic, and 350 to date. That number, of course, will change. And we hope that 22 is going to go back to the 19 numbers. We're looking forward to that. I think that 350 was the TCC training. And this is a chart on the tribal court assessments. The blue is Alaska. We do 30 each year. We divide 15 into one for one assessment team and 15 to another assessment team. And so it's been a total of 219 tribal court assessments in PL 280 states. And the next slide, this I think is very important, and this is what Benny was talking about. In 2017, these are the tribes that received a court assessment. If you are, now Kong is on this list, and Kong has already asked for an assessment, and they will get an update and of course additional funding if the update, whatever the update says they will need. So if you're on this list, and we can share this list with Denise and for further reference, but ask if you're interested, if you're on this list, and we'll make sure you get an assessment. 2018, if your name is on this list, please ask. Kenaitze has not asked, of course, it's not an ABCP village, but there are villages here that within ABCP that can certainly ask. And 2019, this is where we have done these assessments. And 20 is the list here. We're happy to share the list. And then 21. So those are the list of all the villages that have had assessments conducted. And the next slide is these particular villages are in the queue for a new assessment, and they will be getting them quickly. Now, the virtual one-on-one meeting with the Tribal Justice Support, what I'd like to do is, I was talking to Denise about that, and I'd like to set up a time where we meet with you as if we are at the regional meeting, where we all sit down and meet around the table. I'm finding that a lot of tribes are just needing to have a conversation. So what I propose is November the 11th and the 12th. Denise can set up a schedule, and we can go forward with an hour spent with each of the villages and answer all of your questions. So I see Judge O'Gara there. Hello. Anyway, we are so sorry that we are not there, but we do want to talk to you and provide all the assistance that we can. Sometimes it just helps to talk things out. Let me see, Melissa is texting me before I hop off. Oh, look at Melissa. She says, you can't do the 11th, it's a holiday. So let's do the 12th and the 13th. Always on the go, that Melissa. So let's do the 12th and the 13th. And with that, sorry. So with that, I guess I'll sign off and hand it back over to Denise.
Thank you, Tricia. That was really wonderful. I'm getting a really bad echo from my end, so I apologize for that. If any of the tribes that are on the line right now would like to schedule a meeting for either the 12th or the 13th of November, please reach out to us. Our staff is also going to be reaching out to the tribes of our region to see if they are interested in meeting one-on-one with Tricia and her team. So AVCP contact information will be dropped into the chats shortly. We also have the AVCP website, www.avcp.org. We can get those scheduled for you. So next, I would like to invite Monique Von Dalricke to give our next presentation on tribal court budgeting. And I'm going to get that presentation up for you shortly, Monique.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, Tricia and Benny. And of course, Melissa in the background giving us reminders. So as Tricia said, Kodiak LLC is one of the tribal court assessment providers in Alaska, along with the Whitener Group. For most of you that know, my experience with this process is from the onset in Alaska. Trish and I met in, I think it was late 2015, but we really started talking in 2016 as part of the Tawahi project and the Tawahi initiative. And I was lucky enough to be able to do a PowerPoint presentation on the Tawahi outcomes during the Pasquayaki Tribal ICWA conference just recently. So it was great to run into everybody we know, including Rick Garcia, Tricia, Benny, and Melissa were there, and to be able to share some of the great accomplishments that Alaska Tribal Courts and Alaska tribes have created since this process began in late 2015. So I was I originally was the Tribal Justice Director for AVCP, and then I went back to North Dakota, recruited back to my tribe to do some work. Missed Alaska so much that when Gordon and Josh from Kodiak called me up to say, are you interested? I was like, yes. I love Alaska and I love working with tribal courts in Alaska. So I'm really honored to be invited to present to you today and hoping to shed the light on tribal court budgeting. Of course, that's what my beautiful almost Northern Lights picture here is depicting. So if you want to go to the next slide, Denise. So basically, this is how we start out. This is the cover of Shaktoolik's Tribal Court Assessment, which we just completed within, as you can see, September 8th is when we turn that in. So it's very fresh. So Shaktoolik is a tribe in Alaska, obviously, and we began their court process in June. As you can see, our first meeting with them was June 2nd. And so this is like the cover sheet. We always try to get your tribe's logo or a picture of your tribe on the cover. Your tribal court assessment is going to be the best document for you to follow in trying to assess what your needs and priorities are for a tribal court. We help you. If you want to go to the next slide, the whole process, as Tricia pointed out, covers those 5 areas. This is a sample, and the link is where you can find this brochure that describes the tribal court assessment process. So really the process wants to streamline the recommendations and help you create a strategic action plan. And this coincides with the priorities that the tribal council, the tribal court, your judges, they all select as priority. Each of these measures assesses a different area of the tribe and its ability to have a tribal court. And it's important to note that in the tribal court assessments, there's no grading system. There is no right or wrong answer. This is supposed to be a guidance for you. And I believe that's what Congress meant when it passed the act that mandates this process for us. So we really work with you to narrow down your work in creating a budget for your tribal court. Next slide, please. So towards the end of your tribal court assessment, there are these charts, and they kind of, both pages or however many pages, look a lot like this left side here, where you see activities in gray, court safety and security, equipment, infrastructure. It also measures personnel and your policies, codes, your laws that you need to perhaps work on or create. And then of course, it also addresses training and technical assistance. So once we do this review, as you can see on the left side under categories, those gray areas, in the middle is a recommendation, and it's a kind of a general recommendation, because in all the pages that precede this section, you will find all these measure numbers that are in the right-hand column. So these coincide with the actual body of your tribal court assessment. But these summary pages are easier for you to follow and to help design your priorities for your court. We'd love for you to be able to accomplish every single one of these recommendations, but it is not required. You have to prioritize them along with your leadership of the tribe. And so each of these measure numbers comes with their own individual recommendations based on the findings. So it'll say an overview of the measure, and then it'll say findings, like what we find. For instance, I'm just going to throw an example out there. We find that you do not have a clerk of court on staff. One of the recommendations may be budget and hire a clerk of court. That's simple. Some of them get more complicated, like you need an elder abuse code. You know, that is more technical and training. And so we would speak and back it up with information to share. There are a lot of things included in the tribal court assessment that you really need to take note. For instance, there's a lot of freebies that we throw in our tribal court assessments. Some of the footnotes will show those freebies. We always throw in a sample of a subsistence fee schedule. What is that for you non-Alaska people? Well, a king salmon, for instance, might be worth $30 or $50, depending on its size. A silver salmon might be $20. A cord of wood in the lower 48 might only cost you $200. It's going to cost you $500 up in Alaska because they have to gather wood off the river when it's not frozen, for instance, or travel on the frozen river to get to the wood, because woods are not very, like in the YK Delta region, you don't have a lot of forest areas. Over in the Tlingit Haida region, that's a rainforest, but you're going to have more tundra on the other side of the state. So the prices may vary, just like they do bread or the cost of milk in Alaska. Here in Anchorage, we could probably get a gallon of milk for under $4. In Bethel, maybe $8 for a gallon of milk. In the village, it could be up to $20 for a gallon of milk or more. So you see the different regions will have different costs associated with them. So we like to throw in some samples. If a guy wants to file for custody of his children and the filing fee is $25 and there are no jobs in that village, where would he get? Obviously, you want to have an ability to create a waiver of fees or not charge fees in the beginning. That's a common recommendation in Alaska. So you really have to know your Alaska regions in order to follow along with our tribal court assessments in Alaska. And we've done it, and Whitener have done it for quite some time now. So the summary and action plan are read in tandem with the measures above in the text of the assessment. And these are tailored for each tribe. We don't have some blanket list like this action plan chart that I'm showing you here, where it changes with every tribe that we do. We have to have demographics from your tribe. We have to tailor it to your number of tribal members, whether or not you've had a court, whether you had one once upon a time and don't have any because of lack of funding, or whether you've never had a court and you want one. So those are kind of the common themes throughout Alaska tribes that we found out, Denise and I, when I was at AVCP very early on, and we passed that information on to the Tribal Justice Support Directive. And so Tricia and her staff know very well now what goes on in Alaska tribal courts. Next slide, please. So this is a very small portion of a sample budget that you will see that we have templates from the BIA that we can share once we begin the tribal court assessment. And this is extremely important, that once you begin your work with the tribal assessment team, you need to let them lead the way in when you can request your funding. A lot of tribes will just kind of sit on it and have like a wow, like a deer in the headlights. We are not sure what to ask for. We're there to help you as the team. It's part of the requirement that we provide this technical assistance to you. And it's a guidance. And in addition, the policies of the Tribal Justice Directorate will change from time to time, depending on issues that pop up. So one of the issues that might pop up is that we want proof that you're working with your tribal court assessment team. So I might say Yvette, or I might be able to have you email them and give them the sample budget, or give them the templates for the budget, including there's 3 things that come with it. There's this form, there is a sample letter, and then we'll show you in a little bit here, there's a checkoff sheet. And in addition to that, along the right side in purple, it just says needed there, but it'll say documents needed. So where you have documents that are needed to support your request, those need to be accompanied with your letter, your budget, and your justification, which is the quotes. So sometimes Yvette and I will help people with gathering quotes. To be honest, some of the vendors for some of the equipment that you need will only speak to certain regional people. Like I had to have Yvette called about the JAVS Nimble system. And you can see in the green budget form, that very first item is JAVS Nimble system. Why do we say JAVS Nimble system? Because the BIA has already tried and truly tested other tribal courts on what system works best. And so this is the recommended system. And on top of that, it may be the only system that provides all of the features we need for our tribal courts. This system is a recording system that will record your hearings, and they can be very simple systems. I can tell you we did some work with ONC in the past, and ONC has this system. They love it. They said it's portable, it's affordable, and it's very useful and easy to use. So that is why you'll see a particular thing, brand name in there. It's not the federal government's policy to promote particular systems, but in this case, tribal court systems is tribal courts are unique. In fact, that we have many different needs that other tribal courts do not. So being able to tailor those to each tribe is important. Computers, that's up to you. We don't ask you to order gaming computers that cost $10,000, but we want you to be able to, if you need a laptop to take off and go, with most tribes these days, they have to have laptops to take home because of the COVID issues. I do want to say that I just spoke with the Kasiglik Tribal Clerk of Court yesterday, and we have been having some roundtable discussions on COVID effects. And right now, I'll tell you that Kasiglik is a village of about 670 people. And we have, they have 50 plus cases in their community right now. Everybody's working from home. Everybody is ordered to work from home. That being said, in our villages in Alaska, it is extremely expensive for internet access at home. So the clerk of court, because we're working on trying to help them with a clerk of court training for Alaska, called me yesterday to say, please, instead of emailing me, can you call me? Because she has to use her home email or her home internet system. And just from myself living in Bethel, I can tell you that your home internet costs can range up to $800, $1,000 a month if you exceed your plan limits, because in the villages and remote areas, GCI does have plan limits. Sorry, didn't mean to mention a company, but so we understand that these are things that we have to adjust for, especially with the villages that we're working on. So back to our funding and budget form. Thank you for reminding me that the JAVS Nimble system is not necessarily a recommendation of TJS. It's kind of overwhelmingly a system that we recommend as your teams. So there are two types of funding that could possibly come out of your tribal court assessment. The first one is the immediate need funding. And this immediate need funding is something that we say, man, you really need a clerk of court hired ASAP. Let's put some funding in for that. You also need a fireproof filing system that locks. And you need cloud software to store back up your documents that you're going to store in your fireproof cabinet. So we know that a fireproof Fire King cabinet here in Anchorage is close to $3,000. Well, shipping it to a village is going to cost about $500 more in Alaska. So we definitely know that that piece of equipment is probably going to cost you about $3,500 to get shipped out to your village. So there are some things we know, and then there are some things we need you to tell us. Some of the standard things is if you're a brand new court, you want to budget for training for your staff and your judges. So if you want to, so I'm sorry, before going on, I'll address number 2 here. 1 year, one-time funding. It's basically the same budget form, but we're looking at funding for an entire year. And whatever you need outside of immediate needs under the immediate need funding budget, those are going to all fall into the 1 year, one-time funding. Immediate need funding, we are going to budget for the time that we think it's going to take to get a funding letter from them to cover that position, the time that the finances are actually going to hit the tribe's bank. So we can estimate out about 6 months, 4 to 6 months worth of salary for someone under an immediate need funding. The rest of their salary will come out of a 1 year, one-time funding. So part of the salary for a clerk may come out of your immediate need and the remainder out of 1 year, one-time funding. That's the difference. And the 1 year, one-time funding, you have to request that every year right now. Next slide, please, Denise. So this is a very small, you can blow it up if you like, checklist for everything that you need to include in your request. Your letters, though a sample letter comes with your packet in the templates. Those should be on tribal letterhead, obviously. And then one thing, the big question that Melissa and Simone Toya are going to ask us once you get your budget, your letter, your attachments all in there is whether you are a 638 public law 638 contracted or self-governance tribe. That makes a difference in Alaska. Alaska has interesting funding streams that we don't see in the lower 48. 638 means that it's directly compacted with the BIA. Self-governance, as most of us know, means that some of your services are compacted or outsourced either with another tribe or a tribal corporation, a native corporation. For instance, some of ABCP's tribes compact tribal court services with them, and some of their services are non-compacted and directly funded. And tribes in Alaska are able to choose whether they want their TANF program to be, for instance, just a 638 program, or if they want to compact those services to ABCP, which is very commonly done. So it matters your leadership, your staffing in your community. It makes a difference on whether you're going to be a PL 638 or self-governance tribe. So these funding streams are interestingly very complicated, but they don't have to be if you work with Tribal Services and Denise Nerby staff at ABCP, or if you have any questions and you're one of our tribes on a TCA, just give me a call and I can explain things. It does matter when it comes to the time frame for you receiving your funding. It takes it just slightly longer for self-governance funds to get there than 638 funds, just so you know. And sometimes you have to do a little bit of prodding with the BIA. self-governance office, and so that is helpful to be involved with your tribal services director, because they generally are great at doing that. So we don't want you to forget, the estimates need to be attached. So if you're saying it's going to cost you $2,000 in airline tickets for someone to attend the TCC conference in Fairbanks each year, then you're going to have to print out copies of quotes from, the airline. Usually in Alaska, it's Alaska Airline, and then some of the regional airlines. You also have to follow the per diem rates. Thank you, Melissa, for reminding me of the GSA rates. And for Alaska and Hawaii, it'll defer you to the Department of Defense rates for Alaska and Hawaii. So the other guidelines still are intact, meaning on travel days, like let's say we're having a training November 15th in Anchorage. Your travel date may be on the 14th because of how long it takes you to get here. You may have a couple planes from the village. Let's say you're traveling from Point Hope to Anchorage. You're going to have to go on Bering Air to get to Kotzebue, and from Kotzebue to Anchorage, you're going to be on Alaska Air. So that is about an $800 ticket. I think it costs actually almost $1,000 for Yvette and I to fly to Point Hope. So those costs and estimates, you need to print them out, scan them, or do a screenshot. A lot of times if we're trying to get quotes, we'll use Office Max because they have Office Max and Office Depot here in Anchorage, and most of the time they can ship from here. So we'll print those out and we'll scan them, or else we'll just take a screenshot and use them. So the major equipment costs, you're going to want those to be included. For instance, if you want a sign made, a lot of times the tribal court will be held in the tribal building, and the tribal building will not have a sign or just have a sign that says IRA. You need an additional sign to let them know that your tribal court is held there as well. And that in particular, you will have to get a quote from. We have visited with some of the sign makers in Anchorage and gotten general quotes from them. So if you are interested in some of those, that's just the way we go about doing it. And so we like to have some of those on hand for the tribes we work with, so we don't have to keep repeating. But job descriptions is another biggie. Job descriptions, the clerk of court, judges, along with their rates. Some judges are on staff, but the majority of judges in Alaska, I can say, get paid per hearing or a stipend for their time hearing cases. And then other court staff, we do have, for instance, a bailiff job description in general, but by the time these jobs are posted, you obviously are going to have to tailor them to your direct tribal needs. But it's a big deal to have your tribal budgets, court budgets, accompanied by everything else that you need with that, including the quotes. Any questions so far? I'm going to peek at the discussion here. I see you've updated that checklist. Great. Yes, Melissa, follow the GSA rate, which for us in Alaska and Hawaii, again, is the Department of Defense rate. So that's the uniqueness. So help is near. Don't fret. Once you get your budgets together, again, you want to sit side by side with your strategic action plan and your summary of recommendations and your budget and say, okay, I have seen repeatedly in the tribal court assessment, they want us to get docketing software. Where do we begin with that? That is the harder question that is not so easy to answer. It requires additional analysis of your needs for your tribal court, what types of cases you have. Some of this information we can derive from your tribal court assessment, of course, but a lot of it is user-friendly information we need to work with you on. So recommending a tribal court docketing system is not an easy task for us. It's in fact so hard that we have started to make our own beginning stage out of an Excel spreadsheet. So Yvette and I hope to have, by the time we hopefully have a tribal clerk of court training here centralized in Alaska, that we will be able to hand out some beginner docketing software for you free of charge, because we're going to create it ourselves. We've done it before, both of us, and we'll do it again with Excel. So there's a lot of information that goes in to your tribal court assessment that is unique to each tribe. And I want to say that unabashedly, because I automatically assumed, and that's where you really get in trouble, is that all of the tribal courts in Alaska started out like healing to wellness courts. It's true for the majority of Alaska tribal courts, but I just did a tribal court assessment in August where they have never had healing circles. And that was a first for me, that they never ever had one in their community. It was never documented in history. It was never orally shared in their history. So that was unique for me. So don't make assumptions, and don't think that you can't reach out to somebody. Even if you're not one of the tribes assigned to Yvette and myself, we're happy to answer any questions you have on budgeting, because really,
And that's happened.
it's happened quite a bit, and we've had to work with some tribes that have had assessments done by others or not had one yet. And so we always have to give a little bit of advice here and there where we're not designated, but we're happy to do so. So any guidance that you need, and you can't find the help anywhere else, ask us. I just want to say that, and I said this when I was in Arizona, I recall the very first phone call I made to Darlene Daniel at Kongaganak to say, Darlene, Trisha just called me and asked me if you can come up with a $70,000 budget for tribal court. And then the phone went silent and I barely heard. And I was like, are you okay? And Darlene was so happy for the $70,000 that she was crying so uncontrollably. I couldn't understand her. And that to me is the whole purpose of us doing this in Alaska. Not only are we keeping our children in our villages so that they don't get removed and face the trauma that they endure when they are removed from their lifestyles, their families, and their community, but this work is so near and dear to my heart. I can see each and every person that we impact in our tribal communities in Alaska. Thank you for inviting me, Denise and ABCP, and it's always good to see all of you. Judge O'Gara, always a pleasure. Rick, Denise, Nellie, Trisha, Melissa, I could go on and on, Benny. So thank you again. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, call me, or raise your hand.
Monique, I don't know if, am I heard? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you. Is
Okay,
this Melissa?
perfect. Okay, yes, this is Melissa. Hello, everyone. I'm Melissa Lee, and as indicated earlier by Benny and Trisha and everyone else, certainly times that we are in prevent us from visiting one another and seeing one another. But all in all, there's a couple of things. I've emailed Denise our updated checklist and our funding our funding request checklist, along with a template. We do have measures that, as mentioned by Monique, that we're now asking, especially if you've gone through a tribal court assessment, and then a date as to when to, all in all, it's on the document. If Denise can share that, that would be great. I did forward that also to Monique and Yvette. One thing about just a small correction with regards to the immediate needs, if you do start your assessment at the beginning and you work with Monique or any of your other vendors, the immediate needs, if you do have immediate needs, should come then, right when you start the assessment, and then you could do another at the end with regards to a funding request. That way we can fund you right away, and then, but if you find yourself that you're not, that you have an immediate needs and a funding request, or you're one-time funding at the same time submitting it, it's a little bit more work for us. We're having to then combine the two. So in other words, a little bit more work for me. The documents that are mentioned, the supporting documents, those are not just for us, especially those are really for our auditors and then for our 638 tribes. Your local regional office asks for certain things. So, and those who have requested, and we can go more detail into that. I mean, certainly Tribal Justice Support, Betty, myself, Simone, Tricia are available. Email us, and we're readily available to assist. And we try to respond right away with regards to, if we haven't responded, please let us know, call us. We also have our lines forwarded to our cell phones, so we're not afraid to answer our phones. So if we hear them, if they're not on silent. So, but thank you all. I don't know if I didn't, I know there are other things that we need to cover, and there's other people that also need to speak, but I wanted to at least get that immediate needs, and then there's some other things that, so that part I really wanted to get in there. And the GSA per diem rate, to really follow that. So I'm going to be the one to pull it back. It's not going to be Tricia, it'll be me that says, hold on. So, but thank you all.
Very true. Thank you, Melissa. I just wanted to say that a lot of times when we're working with our tribes that we're assigned, they kind of like glaze over that immediate needs, because to them, it's like, wow, the money might not be here for 3 months. How immediate can that be? Well, you could be sitting there for 7, 8 months, and your request could have been there and in your bank. And you could have a clerk of court there working with us instead of a deer in headlights saying, wow, who's going to do that work? Well, in the first place, you get the money to get your clerk so that we work with her on your 1 year, one-time budget towards the end of your assessment, instead of, like Melissa said, combining the budgets. It's harder to justify an immediate need when you're requesting it along with another $150,000 or so to run your court. I did leave dollar amounts out. Sorry, Tricia, until now. Of course, this is all depending on the availability of funding for TJS.
Right, and so I just want to say 3 things. Number 1 is thank you, Denise. I'm going to have to jump off. Melissa's going to stay on, and thank you for everybody and all that you do. This has been an endeavor that has been an absolute success because of everybody here. And the one thing I want to say is everyone here, I've explained to the Department of Justice, this is not our job, this is our life. And so it isn't our career, it is what we do to live. And I know that's true for everybody, including the wonderful TJS staff. We don't recommend any product. We always will give you a tribe to talk to and let you decide what works for you. So that is the department's policy, but it's also self-governance. You decide. We, the Bureau, should never tell you what to do. We strive very hard not to do that. So with all that said, Melissa's going to stay on. I have to jump off. We so very much want to see you all. And I haven't seen Judge Aguirre since I don't know when, but take care. And good luck to everybody. We'll visit with you whenever we can. Bye, Rick. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
We will
Liz.
invite you back whenever we can, Trisha. You're welcome to join us whenever you're able to. Thank you so much.
Bye, Trisha. Good to see you.
Bye.
And thank you, Monique, for your presentation. It was a really good presentation. Very, very informative. Next, I would like to invite Andrea Woya, the AVCP Community Services Division Outreach Coordinator, who will be presenting on PL 280 funding. I do have to say that I encourage everybody to reach out to Senator Murkowski to thank her and encourage her or let her know how helpful the funding was, even if it was a little amount. Every little bit helps for our tribal courts. So I'm just encouraging everybody to do so. Andrea, are you on the line?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm going to share your presentation shortly.
Thank you, Denise. While she gets that put up, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here despite any technical difficulties that you may have had or have been having. I know I have had my fair share today. Thank you, Denise, for the introduction and for running the slides, as well as a big thank you to Trisha and Monique and Benny and Melissa as well. Today I'll be kind of brief, just going over the process that tribes go through to receive PL 280 funding through AVCP. As the ladies before me had talked about, it can be a little easier to go through the route of having AVCP Tribal Justice Department help to get the funding that was distributed from, awarded through BIA. The presentation is up, so let's get started.
So if you just want to tell me next slide whenever you're ready for me to move to the next slide, I'll move it for you.
Okay, thank you. A little about myself. My name is Andrea Wuya. I am currently the outreach coordinator for the Community Service Division at AVCP. I had just recently accepted my position, but I was previously the program coordinator for Tribal Justice and had a good part in helping to distribute PL 280 funding. I was born here in Bethel and raised in both Bethel and Eek and all along the Kuskokwim River. And I'm very, very excited to be here with all of you. Thank you for being here. Denise, if you can move to the next slide. So what is PL 280 funding? As we kind of touched on, what the funding is distributed by the BIA. Oh, looks like we still need to go to the next slide. Okay, there we go. So under the Tribal Court Funding Agreement, AVCP agrees to provide the tribe with funding received from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, BIA, Department of the Interior for the purpose of tribal court administration. These funds will be limited in use to develop and maintain tribal courts. Next slide, please. And on this slide and the next one, we could look at this one first. A little about these slides. Who do we have funding for? So on the left side is all of the tribes that we do have funding for, and as you move over to the right, you'll see FY16, FY17, FY18, and FY19. FY19 was very recently identified this past year, so there are a lot of tribes that we still need to work through the legal process with, and we are the tribal justice team is very eager to also work with the FY16, FY17, and FY18 funding years for those who have not received them yet. So if you see your tribe on this slide, or if you could move to the next slide, please, Denise.
We might be having a little bit of a lag. What I see on my screen here is what is needed to receive PL280 funding. Is that what you're seeing, Andy?
Oh, sorry. No, there should be 2 slides titled "Who do we have funding for?"
Okay, so here's the second one.
I think you move to the second one. We can also email these out if anybody needs more time to look over them. We can move to that next one. Thank you so much, Denise.
No problem. So can you confirm that you're seeing what is needed to receive PL280 funding?
Just a second, I might be having lag as well. Okay, there we go. So what is needed to receive this PL280 funding? First, we start out with making contact with the tribes, usually through email, and if email isn't working, we'll move on to contacting through the phone, but initially getting the tribe to sign a ABCP funding agreement that we then pass through our legal department and get it signed by our CEO as part of the funding process. We will also ask for a drafted, approved sample budget. The sample budget does not have to be very detailed. It just kind of shows us, that you've worked with the administration, you've worked with your team, and you have a plan of how your tribal court plans to use this funding. Moving on to return funding agreement, sample budget, as well as your tribe's funding policy if the Tribal Justice Department doesn't already have a current one on hand. And you're going to want to send those to the tribaljustice@abcp.org email. I've listed it there on the slide as well. The Tribal Justice Department will then send it through our legal process, as well as grants and compliances, the accounting procedure, and that funding will finally be distributed through check to the tribe. Then 9 months after those funds are received, and all of this is laid out in that initial funding agreement, that 9 months after receiving funds, the tribe is responsible for providing a follow-up budget. And this is that budget that's going to be a little more detailed. As you're spending the funding, the PL280 funding, we ask that you collect any receipts or any proofs of purchase. That could be even pictures of online shopping carts, really anything that goes along with how your tribe utilized that funding. And we can move on to the next slide, please. Sorry for the delay, guys.
So what I have on my screen is signing funding agreement.
Yeah, I think my computer's very, very slow today. But yes, signing a little more in depth about that, signing the funding agreement. It is a 4-page document that your tribe must go over. It'll describe the funding, what's allowed with the funding, what you can purchase, such as, stipends or translation, I apologize. Yeah, as I was saying, what you can receive through the funding, as well as all of the legal, the legal matter. And if you can see it up on the slide there. I highlighted where the one signature is needed on this entire document. And once we receive that, we will have our CEO sign it, and it goes along with your funding packet. And if we can move to the next slide. And this next one is the sample budget that I had mentioned earlier, that it doesn't necessarily have to be super detailed. I'll say again that, you know, we'll go back and get that final budget with how funds were actually spent. And you could see on there that supplies, equipment, tribal judge stipends are a few examples of how that funding can be utilized, as long as the total amounts to the $5,000 that's awarded. And we can move on to the next slide, which is those allowable costs that I had mentioned previously, such as tribal court personnel, salary, stipends, benefits, tribal court development, education, outreach and communications, tribal court equipment, supplies, all technical needs, travel, per diem, lodging, other relevant expenses, and training for court staff and workshops, as well as tribal court development, can all be allowable costs in that sample budget. And finally, the next slide, which is the final financial statement. The final financial statement will be requested 9 months after funds are distributed to the tribe. It can include scans of receipts, pictures, screenshots of online shopping carts, a copy of an invoice, anything that you may have filled out to show how those costs were utilized. That will conclude my presentation. I've left room for questions, as well as the contact information for the tribal justice team to get any of this process started. That email again is going to be tribal-justice@avcp.org. Their main number is 907-543-8553. As well as my email. I do not work directly with pushing this funding out. However, I am a main source of contact, so feel free to reach out to me, and I can forward any requests to Tribal Justice. My email is awuya, AWUYA @avcp.org. Again, thank you all for being here. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box or unmute yourself. Denise, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. So if any of the participants have any questions for any of our presenters, I would ask that you press *6 to unmute yourself if you're on the phone, or the little microphone button at the top right-hand corner of your screen, and go ahead and ask your questions or state your comments. The floor is yours. Do we have any questions or comments for any of our presenters?
Hi, this is Estelle. I just wanted to say thank you to all the presenters. It's been really wonderful seeing and hearing you folks again. I know that when I started working in tribal justice, looking through the assessments and everything, it seemed kind of overwhelming at first, but really and truly, the folks that did the assessment, I can't remember the name of the organization, but they presented earlier today. They really laid out a super easy way for you to get started. And one of the things that helped me a lot too when I was working with these folks was talking to Trisha, talking to folks like folks at the Alaska Native Justice Center and Denise and them. It's kind of, I don't know, I think with something as new as this stuff is to a lot of our communities, you can feel kind of, I don't know, shy about asking questions when sometimes you don't know. So I think it'd be really kind of cool to have folks that you can contact aside from, you know, other villages that are going through the building process.
I completely agree, Estelle. Thank you. Like Trisha said in her presentation, I have all of this information, and our program material was emailed out to everybody who was on this call. But if you have not gotten it, or if you're having problems opening that, please reach out to us and we can get that information to you. Tribal Justice at AVCP also provides the service of helping you strategically plan around the recommendations of your tribal court assessment. Outside of the pandemic, we would travel to your community and assist you with that. But because we are in a pandemic now, we are offering that service virtually, telephonically, really any way we can. So if you need help with that, we are also a resource for you to reach out to. All of this contact information for Trisha and her team, for Monique and her team. We also have ANJC. We have a lot of resources. If you need any help with any of this, please reach out to us. We are always very, very honored to help anybody. If there are no questions or no further comments for any of our presenters, I'm just double checking again. Okay, so that was my double checking. So thank you everybody again for taking the time to join us in today's session, and a really big thank you to all of our presenters for the wonderful presentations and all of the information we got today. We look forward to meeting with all of you again next week at 2 p.m. on Tuesday for session 3. During that session, we will hear from Judge O'Gara, and she will be talking about tribal court setup, tribal court startup, and best practices. So with that, I would like to wish everybody a great rest of your week and have a really good day. Thank you.